Stronger than the key. So Prabhupada key. Untitled Srimad Bhagavatam key. She couldn't time up Shashi key. I go pray. Anything on the Vaishnava calendar today to read from? So first of all, reading from Srimad Prabhupada Lila Vita. This is a condensed volume. It's a condensed version, single volume. So this is from the introduction. What was the use? He thought if they wouldn't become devotees, his wife and relatives were not interested in his Jansi preaching, but wanted him to spend more time in business and family affairs. Business and family affairs are never ending. His father-in-law complained, "Why are you always talking about God?" But when friends came to visit, Abhay continued preaching and speaking on Bhagavad Gita, just as he had done in Jhansi, and as before, his wife and the rest of the family would take tea in a separate room. Prabhupada would later recall, "I wanted as much as possible to get her to work with me in spreading Krishna consciousness to get her help, but she was very determined, so finally, after 30 years, I could understand. She would not be any assistance to me." Abhay always advised his wife not to drink tea. It was not the practice of a strict Vaishnava family. Finally, he said, "You have to choose between me or tea. Either the tea goes or I go." This is a very good example here. Abhay's wife replied jokingly, "Well, I have to give it my husband then." Then one day she made a serious mistake. She traded her husband's copy of Srimad Bhagavatam for tea biscuits. When Abhay came home and looked for the sacred book, she told him what had happened. Abhay was shocked, and the incident pushed him to leave his family for good. In a mood of stark determination, he left his family and business. Just see how Krishna works. Srila Prabhupada ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 1, entitled The History of the Life of a Jamil. And this is text 39. I was given the wrong verse, and then I calculated that it would be a different verse. Yeah, I was given the wrong one, 32, and then I was told it was 38. I calculated it would have been 39, but we'll speak from this one anyway. So text 38. 38. Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yadi Nirdesha Karina Yadi Nirdesha Karina Bruta Dharmasya Nas Tatvam Bruta Dharmasya Nas Tatvam Yach Chadarmasya Lakshanam Yach Chadarmasya Lakshanam Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yadi Nirdeshakarina Bruta Dharmasya Nastatvam Yach Chadarmasya Lakshanam Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yadi Nirdeshakarina Bruta Dharmasya Nastatvam Yach Chadarmasya Lakshanam Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yadi Nirdeshakarina Bruta Dharmasya Nastatvam Yach Chadarmasya Lakshanam. Please chant.
Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya
Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya
Yadidam
Yadidam
Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Bhuta Dharmasya Nastatvam Yascha Dharmasya Lakshanam Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yadi Nirdeshakarina Bhuta Dharmasya Nastatvam Yascha Dharmasya Lakshanam Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yadi Nirdeshakarina Bhuta Dharmasya Nastatvam Yascha Dharmasya Lakshanam
Mataji.
Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu Yuyam Vai Dharmarajasya Yadi Nirdeshakarina Bhuta Dharmasya Nastatvam Yascha Srilakshanam
Vilakshanam Srilakshanam
Shri Vishnu Duta Uchu.
Shri Vishnu Dutta
Uchu
The blessed messengers of Lord Vishnu spoke. Yuyam, all of you, Vai, indeed, Dharmarajasya, of King Yamaraj, who knows the religious principles. Yadi, if, Nirdesha, Karina, order carriers, Bruta, just speak, Dharmasya, of religious principles, Na, unto us, Tattvam, the truth, Yat, that which, Cha, also, Adharmasya, of impious activities, Lakshanam, symptoms. Translation. The blessed messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, said, if you are actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. Please repeat. The blessed messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, said, if you are actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. Srila Prabhupada's purport. This inquiry by the Vishnu Dutas to the Yamadutas is most important. A servant must know the instructions of his master. The servants of Yamaraj claimed to be carrying out his orders, and therefore the Vishnu Dutas very intelligently asked them to explain the symptoms of religious and irreligious principles. A Vaishnava knows these principles perfectly well because he is well acquainted with the instructions of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Supreme Lord says, Sarva Dharmam Parityajya Mam Ekam Sharanam Vraja. Give up all other varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Therefore, surrender unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the actual principle of religion. Those who have surrendered to the principles of material nature instead of to Krishna are all impious, regardless of their material position. Unaware of the principles of religion, they do not surrender to Krishna, and therefore they are considered sinful rascals, the lowest of men and fools, bereft of all knowledge. As Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 7:15, Namam Diskutino Mudha Prabhadyante Naradama Maya Pritagyana Asuram Bhavam Ashrita. Those miscreants who are grossly foolish, lost among mankind, whose knowledge is stolen by illusion, and who partake of the atheistic nature of demons, do not surrender unto me. One who has not surrendered to Krishna does not know the true principle of religion, otherwise he would have surrendered. The question posed by the Vishnu Dutas was very suitable. One who represents someone else must fully know that person's mission. The devotees in the Krishna consciousness movement must therefore be fully aware of the mission of Krishna and Lord Chaitanya. Otherwise, they will be considered foolish. All devotees, especially preachers, must know the philosophy of Krishna consciousness so as not to be embarrassed and insulted when they preach. Om Agyan Tamarandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurun Militam Yana Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Yukam Karoti Vachalam Pangam Lagate Garimya Kripatamaham Vande Shri Jinitaranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Ganadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. The blessed messengers of Lord Vishnu, the Vishnu Dutas, said, if you are actually servants of Yamaraj, you must explain to us the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. So Prabhupada takes the opportunity here to explain the importance of the servant must be well acquainted with the instructions of the master. And therefore these guiding principles of Guru, Sadhu and Shastra are so important to us. We cannot just advance in Krishna consciousness by our own mental concoction. Well, I want to do this, I want to do that. Just like the example Prabhupada pastime was, there's one disciple. Now in the beginning, of course, Prabhupada asked the disciples to chant 64 rounds, and they says, oh, we cannot do that. He says, okay, 32. Oh, we can't even do that. He says, okay, minimum 16. So Prabhupada could understand that the devotees are very passionate, so they need some engagement. And by doing 16 rounds a day, they were able to engage in many activities for the propagation of the Krishna conscious movement all over the world. You can just imagine if they all decided simply, we're just going to chant 64 rounds a day and that's our service, then there wouldn't be much movement. It probably would have stayed in 26 Second Avenue. Not saying that Prabhupada wouldn't have pushed a movement if the devotees were chanting 64 rounds, but anyway, back to the story is, so one devotee, I believe this was in Mayapur, certainly it was in India, and he was chanting some extra rounds, but he wasn't doing any service, and the reports were coming back to Prabhupada, oh, now he's chanting 32 rounds, and Prabhupada says, okay. He says, now he wants to chant 64 rounds. He said, oh yes, yeah, he wants to chant 64 rounds, and now he wants to live in a tree. And Prabhupada says, this I want is simply sense gratification. So the devotees were thinking, oh, this person is so amazing. You know, he just wants to chant all day. Now he wants to just live in a tree. And Prabhupada says, he wants. It's his desire. But what about the spiritual master's desire? So this is a very good lesson. Sometimes it even appears that the instructions in the Shastra or from the spiritual master can be contradictory. But that's because we're not understanding the Desha Kalapatra, or time, place, and circumstance, or time, place, and candidate principle. And this is because the spiritual master is fixed in the mission of his spiritual master, then he applies Desha Kalapatra in order to fulfill the desire of his spiritual master. So therefore it's important that we become well acquainted. That's why also we read Prabhupada Lilamrita every day, because we want to get to understand Prabhupada, how he interacted with the disciples, how he interacted as a devotee, living in the material world, dealing with non-devotees. So many different challenges. Prabhupada showed how to take shelter of Krishna and overcome them, and how to establish a worldwide movement. And basically he showed us that anything we need to overcome, if we look at his life, we can understand from his example how we can overcome. So of course we could say, well, looking back on what we just read about Prabhupada there, is that Prabhupada gave up family life on account of his wife drinking tea. Wasn't so much that, it was more like he had tried for 30 years to encourage his family to get involved in Krishna consciousness. And the last straw was basically when the Bhagavatam, which is most dear to Prabhupada, and how do we see it's most dear, is because Prabhupada spent practically his last breath translating the Bhagavatam. He brought the Bhagavatam to the West. He didn't bring kartals, mridanga, deities. He brought the Bhagavatam, the light of the Bhagavatam. And also, it's mentioned in the Srimad Bhagavatam that in this dense dark age of Kali Yuga, people who have lost their vision due to this dense dark age of Kali Yuga shall get light from this Bhagavad Purana. And Srila Prabhupada's personal servant, Hari Sauriprabhu, he also gives lectures on the person Bhagavat. Prabhupada, the person Bhagavat. So that's also mentioned in the Bhagavatam, that there's the book Bhagavatam, book Bhagavat, and there's a person Bhagavat who's the individual who's living, practical living example of that. So here Srila Prabhupada is saying that this is the duty of all devotees, is to become the order carrier of the spiritual master, which means also we must aspire to become person Bhagavat. Not that we just think, oh, that's Prabhupada, that's beyond my aspiration. Prabhupada came to show us that we should be aspiring to be like this too. Of course, we cannot imitate Srila Prabhupada. It's a very dangerous and foolish thing to do. And that can lead to sahajism, or taking things cheaply. But Mahajana Yena Katasa Panta, we should follow in the footsteps of the previous acharyas, the spiritual master, who followed the teachings of his spiritual master. So it's more important to follow the teaching than simply to try to imitate the personality. So it's interesting here that in the translation to Sarvadhamma Prityaja, Prabhupada says, give up all other varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. So he talks about all other varieties of religion. So what to speak of giving up or attachments or giving up sinful activities? He's talking about giving up all other forms of religion. Now, he's not saying giving up religion and become a debauchee. It's not that, okay, now that I'm a devotee, I can just become, I can chant Hare Krishna and do whatever I like because we're doing the topmost thing. But topmost means including the things below it, or surpassing. Surpassing, like, for example, the Karma Kanda section of the Vedas describes how to perform pious activities in order to get a good result. And in this way, they're avoiding sinful action, etc. So that's all very well if you want to stay in the material world and make your prison cell a very nice place to live in, but still it's a prison cell. You might get some favors from the governor of the prison and get some nice curtains, a room with a view, and then you get some chrome-plated bars on your cell. Or even if you've been very good, you may get some solid gold bars on your cell, but still, you may get a comfy mattress. You get a Slumberland mattress, but still you're in the prison house. So this is Karma Kanda. We improve our lot in the material world, but still we're in the material world. But Krishna consciousness takes us beyond that. It is beyond material piety. So therefore, it's not that we can do anything, everything, and call it Krishna consciousness. But if we understand what is the mission, then we know how to apply Desha Kalapatra in order to get it done. And we see in Prabhupada's lifestyle, there's many examples of that. Ordinarily, a sannyasi doesn't perform fire sacrifices for weddings. He doesn't perform marriages. But Prabhupada was alone in America in the beginning, so who else would do it? So therefore he would do it, even though people would criticize him for it, but who else was going to do it? So he did it. He did the needful. So sometimes we have to do this. We have to do the needful. Of course, we also have to set a good standard of behavior so that we're not reproached by the public. Sometimes devotees do something in the name of time, place, and circumstance, and it could be seen as being questionably immoral in the eyes of the public. So we also have to bear that in mind. So here the Vishnudutas are testing the servants of Yamaraj. They're saying, well, if you're actually the servants of Yamaraj, then you should know this and you should know that. So let's hear it. What have you got to say for yourself? So they were challenging them. They weren't just like physically powerful, but because they were representing Sanatana Dharma, eternal religion, then they could ask these questions. And we're going to find out also in the next verse the questions which they're asking them to see, are you doing this out of duty? So this is a very important point, actually, out of duty. Materially, we think duty is something undesirable or distasteful or something to be avoided. If I can get out of my duties, then I can go and do what I want. Like when you were kids, maybe you had to do some housework or homework, do the dishes, take the dog for a walk or something, but you just want to go out and play. And then your parents would say, do your duties first and then you can play. So you might just like skip out the bedroom window, or you might tell a fib that, oh yeah, I've done it. And then it turns out you didn't, and you get punished, you get detention or something. So the thing with duties in the spiritual platform are the opposite of material duties. These duties are actually liberating. It's not something to be avoided. It's actually something which sets us apart from material existence. And because the living entity wants to enjoy separately from Krishna, then they forget about their actual true nature. They're not doing anything in relation, not performing any duties in relation to their own real welfare. They're simply thinking, what can I get here and now to enjoy? What can I get to advance my material situation? And this work-reward system, it comes in many different ways. It may mean that someone is labouring, and at the end of the week or the end of the month, they get a pay which they can go and enjoy their senses with. It could be that. Or it could be someone is into academics, and the reward they get is prestige. You know, the money side is not so important to them, but the prestige they get, that's the reward. So we have to be very careful not to think that, well, I've done this for Krishna, and now it's time to get my feet up. You know, what do I get for this? So we shouldn't be cultivating that in ourselves or in others. We have to cultivate this, we have to get out of this work-reward mentality. Prabhupada, he's very much strongly speaks against this, because this is keeping us in the material world. If we think we have to or others have to get a reward for something they did, then we're not sufficiently in touch with what is the real reward. The real reward is higher knowledge of the activities we're doing, why we're doing it. This is the thing, it's a lazy, easy sidestep just to think, oh, let's just get material reward. That's a sidestep, that's keeping us still in that material consciousness. Krishna consciousness activity is not a material activity. We have to understand that, and we have to practice it, and we have to be able to explain that and preach it to others. Otherwise, Prabhupada says here that all the devotees, especially preachers, must know the philosophy of Krishna consciousness so as not to be embarrassed and insulted when they preach. So sometimes when we go out preaching, we share Krishna consciousness with others, and we may come across some challenge. And if we're not sufficiently educated in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness, we may be defeated, even though we know we're right, we know we've got the right thing, but we're just not sufficiently prepared. So when we're reading, we should be thinking, this is a good thing about preaching, is when you go out to preach, you realize where your shortcomings are. You realize, well, I came across this one today, and although I knew the person was wrong, I didn't have the answer for them. So therefore, the devotees come back and they talk about these things, and then say, well, we just say this, and then you tell this, and then you turn it back on them, like this. Like, for example, one time a person came up to me in the street and says, why are you forcing this Krishna consciousness onto people? Why are you stopping people in the street and imposing yourselves upon them? You know, you shouldn't impose yourself upon people. I says, it's a very interesting point. Do you really believe that we shouldn't be imposing our views on people? He said, yeah. I says, so why are you speaking to me? You're imposing upon me that I shouldn't be imposing upon others. So the best thing you could do is practice what you preach, which is to shut up and go away then. So of course it was a little bit kinder than that, but and he understood the philosophy. I says, well, that is, you've got a right to believe that we shouldn't impose, but my belief is not that. My belief is that we're here to try to show, to give a bit of enlightenment, to show some compassion. You know, people are concerned with compassion of the material body, but this Bhagavad Gita has shown the highest compassion, which is the not the sufferings of the body, but what is the root cause of all these sufferings. So we can do some patch-up job. You know, we could send money to this, we can feed that, and you know, devotees do these things. But ultimately, the highest compassion is to show spiritual path. So therefore, the devotees of the Krishna conscious movement, they go out on the streets and they chant Hare Krishna. Bhaktivinoda Thakur says the highest form of religion is to loudly chant the holy names of the Lord. Does anybody remember the Bengali for that? Sarva Dharma Sar, that's part of it. Sarva Dharma Sar. I can't remember that. Although Krishna Bhaja, Krishna Kora, Krishna Shika. Anyway, this is back to Nil Thakur, the grandfather or the great-grandfather of the Krishna consciousness movement, is saying this is the highest form of religion, so therefore the devotees go out and they chant on the streets. And people get benefited by this, and some people actually appreciate it. I remember once doing Harinam on Byers Road in Glasgow, and one man came up and he says, "Thanks very much for doing this because it's purifying the atmosphere." And it was really amazing. You think, well, somebody obviously must have read one of Prabhupada's books. And we don't know what people are thinking out there. And people are becoming purified. You know, we had, a couple of years ago, we had a form came from Berlin prison asking, so what is the diet of the Krishna consciousness devotees? Because sometimes we get people in here who claim to be Hare Krishnas as their religion and that they're vegetarian. What is their diet? Same with the health, the national NHS Scotland. We got some form asking us, you know, what is the diet of the Hare Krishnas? So the Krishna consciousness movement is spreading just because we don't see thousands of devotees, you know, descending into Les Mehigo to get shaved up and put on a dhoti and sari. Doesn't mean to say the movement is not expanding, it is. And expanding by the chanting of the holy name on the streets, the people are relieved from the material fatigues immediately. You see they're uplifted. And that Prabhupada also mentions in the first canto, that if one witnesses a devotee performing devotional service, automatically that person is raised to the mode of goodness just by seeing that devotee. So this is chanting, and of course distributing prasadam. When we offer food to Krishna, that becomes Krishna also. Therefore, people are accepting Krishna. So when we give out prasadam, we're not just like feeding empty stomachs. We're giving them Krishna consciousness. And this type of service performed unknowingly, service begins with the tongue, isn't it? From chanting and taking prasadam. So they already began their devotional service. They're accepting prasadam. Used to be considered sometimes if someone wouldn't take prasadam that they were too sinful to even accept prasadam. We used to lament at that if they wouldn't take prasad. And there's some proof of that. But then gradually, by the will of the devotees, then people are benefited. Just like Srila Prabhupada, he mentioned to one of his devotees, who's extremely intelligent, in order to remind him of where he came from, he says, "Don't forget, I'm your intelligence. Don't forget, I'm your good fortune." So there's this saying, "There go I, but by the grace of God." So it's not that we consider ourselves to be superior in some way, because we're all eternal spirit souls, part and parcel of Krishna, but we're more fortunate. We're fortunate in that we've somehow or another, by the mercy of Krishna and the devotees, been exposed to Krishna consciousness in such a way that we're able to take to it. And Prabhupada says that the way to repay the spiritual master, although our debt to the spiritual master cannot be repaid, I mean, how can you repay someone for giving you eternal life full of bliss and knowledge? You can't pay that back. But such an eternal debt is not a debt that you want to be rid of, because the appreciation, the mood of the devotee is to be so appreciative, especially for the well-wishers, that they're quite happy to eternally serve that person. And Prabhupada says that even if you want to try to repay that debt, then the way to do that is to share Krishna consciousness with others, so to go and preach Krishna consciousness to those who are less fortunate. And this is the way where we can please the spiritual master the most. And of course, Krishna says that in Bhagavad Gita, "There are none so dear as one who preaches my glories." So in order to become Krishna Priya, sometimes devotees get the name Krishna Priya, Das or Dasi, or Vishnu Priya, Lakshmi Priya, so many Priyas. But how to become really Priya, to become really dear to Krishna, is to do what is most dear to Krishna. And Krishna himself personally, Paritanaya sadhunam vinashaya chaduskritam, dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. He personally comes to deliver the devotees, re-establish the principles of religion, and to annihilate the miscreants. And in Kali Yuga, annihilation of the miscreants is to annihilate them through his compassion, to bestow upon them the highest form of benediction, which is Krishna Prema. Prema Pumarta Mahan, the highest benediction for the human being is to be bestowed with pure love of Krishna. And Lord Chaitanya is considered Mahavranya Avatar, the most merciful incarnation, because he came to give the highest to the lowest. In Kali Yuga, everyone's considered less than Sudra. And but Lord Chaitanya is freely giving love of God. All we have to do is take it. Enechi Aushadi Maya Nasi Barulagi. We take this Maha Mantra, which is the Aushadi, the medicine, and simply by chanting, all we have to do is take to this chanting, and then learn about Krishna. Bolo Krishna, Bhajo Krishna, Koro Krishna, Sika. So chant the holy name of Krishna, worship Krishna, and learn all about Krishna from the Vedic literatures, from the spiritual master, from the devotees. So this is the Krishna conscious movement. And of course, movement means some movement, not that we just, stay here in Les Mahego and we'll just enjoy kirtan and prasadam to ourselves. But it's moving, which means we're taking it to others. Of course, during the pandemic, that's been somewhat restricted, but the devotees have been preparing themselves for the opportunity when they can once again take this Krishna conscious movement in its trident form. Like Lord Shiva has a trident, so also ISKCON has a trident for attacking the effects of Kali Yuga. And this trident consists of prasadam distribution, chanting the holy name, and book distribution. So this book distribution is considered Brihat Madanga. Just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur was saying that the highest form of religion is to loudly chant the holy name of the Lord. And Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the son of Bhaktivinoda Thakur and the spiritual master Srila Prabhupada, called it Brihat Madanga. The printing press was the big Madanga, because the Madanga can be heard for 1 or 2 blocks, but the Shastra, that can be distributed all over the world. Even Prabhupada went to Russia for a couple of days, and by Krishna arrangement, he met one person who was able to receive a copy of the Bhagavad Gita, I think it was, and they passed that around. People were handwriting, they were hand copying the Bhagavad Gita and passing their copies to others. They were photocopying it, hand copying it. And this way, the Krishna consciousness movement was underground, spreading like wildfire. And when the Iron Curtain lifted in the late 80s, early 90s, then there were swarms of devotees coming to India to visit the Holy Dham. The swarms of temples, of course. Still, they're experiencing some challenges in that part of the world, challenges which we are not experiencing. In the beginning in Scotland, we had some challenges. We used to, every time we go to chant on the street or distribute books, we'd get arrested. We'd have to play cat and mouse with the authorities. But by persisting in due course of time, then we just become part of the street furniture. And not only do they allow us, but they also protect the devotees. So we see also this happened in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes. The Chandkazi was persecuting the devotees for Harinam. But then when he realized that Lord Chaitanya's movement is a bona fide movement, it is a directly Dharma, I forget the Sanskrit word, directly the order of the Lord, directly the mission of the Lord, then not only did he allow it, but he said that they should not be interfered with. And this sign we see in the temple here, apparently Kripamoy Prabhu was telling us that this was the sign of the Chandkazi at that time. So that was adopted by the Vaishnavas to show that we are authorized. They carried this around in Harinam, this placard. They carried it around to show that we are authorized by the Chandkazi to chant on the streets. And he gave the order that nobody should, and even from his succeeding generations, no one should interfere with that. I believe there's a sign in Mayapur. Has anybody seen that sign? I don't know if it's the actual sign. I think it's an updated one, but I've seen one which was near the Jagannath temple on this order. So Krishna, who appeared in Kali Yuga as a Yuga avatar, Lord Chaitanya, he is Ajita, he's unconquerable. He cannot be conquered. His desires cannot be frustrated. Our desires are frustrated. That's why we get angry. That's why we get upset. That's why we get morose, because our material desires are sometimes frustrated. Or sometimes even our spiritual desires, we have perhaps lacking the patience to stick it out to fulfill our spiritual desires, but we shouldn't become disheartened, because there's many examples in the Shastra where people who came from degraded situations like our own became great devotees, and that's why that example of Jaga and Madhya there, that they were most degraded. Sometimes we think, oh, I'm so sinful, that I'm such a rascal, I'm such an embarrassment. But this redemption of Jaga and Madhya is there to show us that it doesn't matter where you've came from, it's where you're going. That's what's important. Every sinner has a future and every saint had a past. Of course, unless you're a Nitya Siddha, eternally liberated soul. But Srila Prabhupada makes the point in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that once the devotee becomes re-established in their original constitutional position as Nitya Siddha, they'll realize that they were never Nitya Baddha. This Nitya Baddha, eternally conditioned situation, is actually only a temporary thing which is perpetuated. So this perpetual, sometimes the word eternal is changed for perpetual. It's only perpetual as long as we perpetuate it. But when we stop engaging in this material activity and engage in Krishna conscious activity, then we're no longer Nitya Baddha. Then we become Nitya Siddha. So as long as we keep up, and of course, because we're conditioned to this work-reward system, we think, well, I'll do some Krishna consciousness and then I can go and enjoy for a bit. And this is like the elephant taking the bath. And then after it's purified by taking the bath, comes out and rolls in the dirt. So this is likened, this is the seventh offense against the holy name. Is like, we'll become purified by Krishna consciousness, and now that I'm purified, I can enjoy better. So let me go and enjoy. And sometimes that happens because we become purified, our intelligence becomes purified, and we can see, oh, I know how to enjoy the material world now. We forget where we came from, and then we end up going back to that. So therefore, in this sense, atonement, which has been discussed here, atonement is actually not good enough. Srila Rupa Goswami explains that there is no atonement in Krishna consciousness, but actually the real atonement is to engage in Krishna conscious activities, to replace our material activities, and to engage in Krishna conscious activities. And to show compassion, just as we've been shown compassion, somehow or another, Krishna has brought us to the shelter of his lotus feet. And Krishna is extremely pleased when we go and show compassion to others, and this makes us very dear to Krishna. Krishna is attracted, although Krishna is all attractive, the very name Krishna means all attractive. That's one meaning of Krishna. Then Krishna himself, as mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion, is attracted by the pure devotional service. And this pure devotional service, even though we may have so much history of activities in this material world, when we engage in this propagation of the Krishna consciousness movement, then Krishna very quickly he's attracted to that devotee. He's saying, just see this devotee is undergoing so much difficulty to try to catch my attention. And Yashya Prasadad Bhagavat Prasado. So to please Krishna, we please the spiritual master. And pleasing the spiritual master means following the spiritual master's instructions and learning how to associate properly with the devotees and putting into practice this philosophy of Krishna consciousness movement and learning how to distribute that teaching, learning how to relate that teaching to other people. So it's of course, we all, in order to learn this, then we have to read Srila Prabhupada's books regularly every day. We get purified by that association. We're basically associating with Srila Prabhupada by reading his books. And when we distribute them, we're arranging for other people to get Prabhupada's association. and this is a great mercy upon them. And this is the amazing principle of Krishna consciousness, is that the more you give, the more you get. In material life, the more you give, the less you have. But in Krishna consciousness, the more you give, the more you have. So just like Lord Nityananda in the Song of the Broker, you will give, you'll chant the holy name and I'll get my commission. So when we get our commission, when we distribute books, when we chant the holy name, when we distribute prasadam, they're getting benefited. The people who have donated to enable us to print books, to cook prasadam, etc., they're getting benefited. The devotees who are cooking, arranging, organising, distributing, they're all getting benefited. So it's completely all auspicious, the Sankirtan movement. And this is how we very quickly get the mercy of the spiritual master, Yashya Prasada Bhagavat Prasada, and therefore the mercy of the Lord Krishna. And sometimes Prabhupada mentions that, I think it's in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that the devotees of the Krishna conscious movement take great risks in propagating this Krishna conscious movement. And sometimes it's at risk to their own Krishna consciousness, because they may approach someone and their level of faith, although they do believe in Krishna and they practice Krishna consciousness and they experience something, they may come across some very staunch atheistic or very intelligent non-devotee who may shake their faith somewhat. But then what we have to do is keep good association, because by good strong association then our faith can be re-established and it may become stronger. So this is why we have to learn this philosophy. And sometimes learning means we realize where our gaps are in understanding. Even in Lord Chaitanya's pastimes, there was one devotee who was eternally liberated soul, but because he was considered, was it Madhyam or Kanista? That would have been Madhyam. Was it Kanista? Then he couldn't defeat the person who was preaching Mayavad philosophy, but at the same time his own faith wasn't disturbed. But still, the fact that we try to do that, and Krishna is very much attracted to those trying to be a devotee in the material world, because the material world is set against being a devotee. The material world is set up for us to forget Krishna. It's very easy to forget Krishna. So therefore we have to keep on endeavouring. We can't let up for a moment. And this is the first principle of Krishna consciousness, to always remember Krishna, never forget Krishna. So the Vishnudutas here, they're going to ask the Yamadutas to explain the meaning of religious principles and the symptoms of irreligion. And we're going to find out more about the devotee situation here. It's such a valuable chapter, so much so that it was written into a book on its own called Second Chance, which gives great hope in this Kali Yuga, which is such a degraded age, and which seems to, when you think it can't get any more crazier, it just gets worse, just when you think it can't get worse. But this is the nature of it, it's going to be degrading more and more. Although with Lord Chaitanya's Sankirtan movement here, it's considered a golden age, where still the opportunity to become a devotee and get out of this material world is still available. Okay, so we just stop there. Anyone got any questions or comments?
Is it too optimistic to think that in the time of Chankasi, Lord Nrsimha had a word of the Chankasi, and then he changed his tune. So is that something that would have happened there more when Lord Chaitanya was present? And should we expect these types of things to happen?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Thanks, Prabhupada. So the question is, too optimistic to expect that something like that could happen nowadays, that it was just something that happened then because Lord Chaitanya was around with his eternal associates. So the thing about Lord Chaitanya's pastimes is that they're eternal, and we're engaging in them just now. The Lord Chaitanya and his pastimes and his devotees and Lord Nrsimhadev appearing there, it wasn't like some historical thing. It's a devotional thing, which means the Lord will also appear here and now, and he does. It's mentioned in Kali Yuga, the Lord appears in the form of his holy name. And also, there's many stories from devotees who've experienced Lord Nrsimhadev came to protect them in different circumstances. There's one young girl, I think it was in South Africa, if I remember rightly. I think it was Giriraj Maharaj was explaining she got hit by a car and she went flying up in the air, came down, and everyone's thinking when they seen her getting hit, she's a goner. But I can't remember the detail whether she went in a coma or whether she immediately got up. Do you remember it?
Yeah, she said that. She knew who Lord Nrsimhadev was, and she said he saved me, but he was a nonsense because he scratched me, and then she had scratch marks.
That's right. So Lord Nrsimhadev caught her. There's also an instance in was it Serbia or Croatia that Indradyumna Swami was doing Harinam party, and the Sangha was there. He's got the knife wounds to show it. They were attacked. Devotees were attacked, and they were getting beaten, and Nrsimha got stabbed. But Indradyumna Maharaj, he went aside and he started chanting some Nrsimha mantras, and then these attackers fled. They were shouting, "There's a lion, there's a lion," and they fled. Because sometimes the devotees, because they've got a certain amount of Brahma Tejas, certain Brahmachari Shakti, then they can be quite strong. But still, they were being overpowered by these people who had decided to attack the devotees. So they didn't take shelter. Indradyumna Maharaj, being the very surrendered devotee that he is, he didn't try to just use physical prowess, even though he was a Marine before. He was in the Marines. He was very fit, very with it devotee. He didn't try to take shelter in some material thing. Immediately he took shelter in Lord Nrsimhadev, who protected him. For those who are interested in martial art, this is the highest form of martial art, is to take shelter in Krishna, who is unconquerable. We see this also in the 5th canto, Jad Bharat. He, the deity of Durga, manifests through that deity. She actually stepped off the altar and annihilated those people who were going to make a human sacrifice of Jad Bharat. And sometimes the personality will enter into that body of the person and they'll act through that person. But the highest form of self-defense is to give up defending, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. Prabhupada says the most difficult one is defending, to give up defending. And we think, because we're attached to sex life or attached to food or whatever, or attached to sleep, we think those are difficult, and we think, oh, defending, I haven't had a fight for years, or I don't have any guns or knives. But defending our false ego, this is such a thing. It's like, say someone chastises us, and we think, who are you talking to? This is what we're like, isn't it? We defend our false ego. So this is the most difficult one to give up, because it means taking full shelter in Krishna, and it means making ourselves vulnerable. But we make ourselves vulnerable under Krishna's protection, then we're fully protected. This is just like in the ancient times. The duty of the Kshatriya, if someone surrenders to that person, the duty of the Kshatriya is to protect. So similarly, Krishna is obligated. If one surrenders to him, it's his duty to protect. How he chooses to do that is up to him. And sometimes it seems like it's just not going to happen until the very last moment. And then Krishna saves his devotee. Because Krishna will test, are you actually surrendered, or are you just making a show? He knows, but he's letting us know. I don't know if that answered your question. Was that okay?
I was just thinking in regard to how Rita has has a well in his ear. It is possible.
Well, of course, Krishna, thanks for reminding us what the question was, is that Krishna can act in many unseen ways. It's like Kadamba Kanamaj once was asked, have you seen God? And says, I've seen the hand of God many times. So sometimes we can see Krishna's arrangement taking place, which is beyond something we could have done. And it's good to remember these times, because in times when our faith is tested, then to remember these times where something amazing happened, that was Krishna's arrangement. It wasn't just some coincidence. Devotees don't believe in coincidence. Yeah, so we too can also experience the amazing hand of Krishna in our life. Raghunath Prabhu?
The question from Ayman. What can you say about burning off bad karma and the spiritual path?
Okay. Hi, Krishna Eamon. Thanks for your question. So, I was actually thinking I was going to begin class from the next verse, and I'd prepared a little something for that, so I think I might have an answer to that one. So, about burning bad karma and the spiritual path. Okay, so let me see. There's a quote from Bhagavad Gita, 18, chapter 18, verses 9 to 12. So here in this verse in the Bhagavatam, the Vishnudus are asking the next question is, who are the candidates for punishment? And are all karmis engaged in fruitive activities punishable, or only some of them? So, not wanting to be a spoiler of the next verse, but still it's relevant to the question. Okay, so this is talking about prescribed duty. So prescribed duty should, text number 7 in chapter 18, prescribed duty should never be renounced. If one gives up his prescribed duties out of illusion, such renunciation is said to be in the mode of ignorance. And text 8, anyone who gives up prescribed duties as troublesome or out of fear of bodily discomfort is said to have renounced in the mode of passion. Such action never leads to the elevation of renunciation. And then finally, text 9, Arjuna, when one performs his prescribed duty only because it ought to be done and renounces all material association and all attachment to the fruit, his renunciation is said to be in the mode of goodness. So, and then Krishna goes on to explain more about that particular one. So, the intelligent renouncer situated in the mode of goodness, neither hateful of inauspicious work nor attached to auspicious work, has no doubts about work. So in the purport here, Prabhupada is talking about a Krishna-conscious person does not hate anyone or anything which troubles his body. He does not work in the proper place. He does work in the proper place at the proper time without fearing the troublesome effects of his duty. Such a person situated in transcendence should be understood to be the most intelligent and beyond all doubts in his activities. And text 12, for one who is not renounced, the threefold fruits of action, desirable, undesirable, and mixed, accrue after death. So this is more related to your particular question, Eamon. But those who are in the renounced order of life have no such result to suffer or enjoy. And Prabhupada says in the purport, a Krishna-conscious person acts in knowledge of his relationship with Krishna, is always liberated. Therefore, he does not have anything to enjoy or suffer the results of his acts after death. So by becoming a Krishna-conscious person, automatically we're freed from sinful reactions. This is simply a byproduct. Of course, while we're aware of the sinful activities we performed and we're aware of the reactions which may come, or where we're aware that reactions will come, then we become perhaps worried for the future, and that's understandable. As we become a devotee, we'll see unfolding in this chapter how a devotee who takes to Krishna consciousness, when Prabhupada talks about the renounced order of life, he's talking about becoming a devotee of Krishna, not that we simply become sannyasi. Because Prabhupada said that this movement, Krishna conscious movement, is a movement of Paramahamsas, even not just sannyasis, but great swan-like devotees. So therefore, Prabhupada has given us a way that regardless of, even if we're the most sinful of all sinners, when we come to Krishna consciousness, that's all in the past. And as long as we take the shelter of Krishna and continue to take shelter of Krishna, then we have nothing to fear. Therefore, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, the almost final instruction is, one who surrenders unto me, Sarvadam Praja, Jamamikam Sharam Praja, Ham Tam Sarva Papi Bio Moksha Yashami Masuchaha. Abandon all varieties of religion, as we were saying earlier on, not abandoning the religious principles, but abandoning all varieties which are materially motivated, Kaitava Dharma, materially motivated religion, and just surrender unto me, because Krishna is the goal of all the Vedas, Krishna is the goal of all religious principles. I shall protect you, personally he's saying this, I shall protect you from all sinful reaction, do not fear. So when we surrender to Krishna, we have no fear. And therefore, Arnaiko Kaliar boy, in the age of Kali, there's no fear because the merciful Lord Nityananda has brought the holy name of Lord Chaitanya to every town and village. So when we give Krishna consciousness to others especially, then the Yamadutas, or the fear of reactions for our sinful activities, is far away. And it's also mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion that when one dances and chants and claps hands in front of the deities, then the birds of sinful activity fly far away. Just as if you go into here in the field, sometimes we plant seeds and there might be some birds or crows come to pick the seeds and you go and clap your hands and then they fly away. So when we dance and chant in front of the deities, then the birds of sinful activities fly far away. And we can experience that free from fear. And Krishna also says that Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, being free from attachment, fear and anger, being fully absorbed in me, many persons in the past became purified by knowledge of me and thus attained transcendental love for me. So to become free from fear, attachment, fear and anger. So attachment means fear. We're afraid of losing our attachment, which dear is. We get angry for some risk at losing our attachments, whether it be possessions, our own body, family members, friends, situations. But becoming free from those things by being fully absorbed in Krishna, then we attain transcendental love for him. So I hope that answers the question. So we'll just stop there. It's gone Guru Vinda ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande.